Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani back with the penultimate edition of Common Sense, Rudy's Common Sense, for 2022. That means the second to last. I know you know that, but just in case, I thought we'd work on expanding my vocabulary. And it's going to kind of be connected to the ultimate edition. Because last year, as you might remember, we did the top, I believe it was 10 stories, if you will, of 2021. This year, we're going to do a little bit differently. This time, I think we're going to stick more to our mission, which is to bring you what you don't get elsewhere. I don't see it as my own mission. I see it as the mission of, the people I talk about and the people whose shows I appear on and people who appear on this show. And I think we're a group that preserving the First Amendment for the United States of America, because the Bidenistas, the cabal of the Biden administration, the crooked upper level of the Democrat Party, we know now Silicon Valley and all of those oligarchs, I mean, the Times and the Washington Post and NBC, ABC, they've been gone a long time as newspapers or journalists. I mean, they are state organs and worse than I think any of it ever thought. I mean, they actually take directions on who to censor, who to drop out. They define a truth opposite of what it is. It's a Orwellian, doublespeak example. The border is closed. And while the Democrats saying that 500 people are, knocking him down, coming over the border. And then he stands up, all beaten up, bloody, and says, the border is closed. That's about what's going on, right? And that'll run through. So I'm going to try to point out the ones that haven't gotten the degree of attention they should, nor the fear that we should have of them, of what they could do to us. Remember, I used the image of the express train to Marxism. That express train went a long way in 2022. And we're going to examine, by the time we get to the end of this, whether it's in the station by now. And when I say Marxism, let's not mince words. We don't do that. They do. I'm talking about communism. Socialism is merely a method, a way to communism. It's the economic system, and communism is the political and cultural system. But there is no cultural system because they wipe out culture. But okay, so let's start in. So what could our universe of choices have been? Very legitimately. Of course, it could have been the Ukraine war. It could have been the midterms. It might be. It could have been the Johnny Depp trial. It took up a lot of attention. It won't be. Or it could be the Oscar slap. It won't be. Could be the war in the Republican Party over the leadership of the party, which will mean a lot to next year. Or it could be the Trump resurgence or the DeSantis emergence. Nice, huh? Be a nice title, right? Trump resurgence, DeSantis emergence. Could be that. Those are all big stories for 2022, which all have implications going into 2023. And of course, the year we're all thinking about, 2024. I'm going to pick five. So we can do a little concentration on them. And then it'll tell you something about what we're going to lead into for next year. And then I'm going to tell you some very exciting information about next year, because next year we're going to try to go much bigger. We have to have a bigger impact. And I should say, the good news is we, at the latter part of last year, starting with the World Series, we started doing live streaming, and it's become enormously successful. It's grown 100 times since we started. And we have real plans for that, and to marry this into it as well as, you can get me every day between 3 and 4 Eastern time on WABCradio.com all over the world, like Joel from Israel gets me. Or if you're in New York, of course, you just put on 77 AM. Long Island, you can do WLIR. You can get me in St. Louis. And also, you can get me online. Best way to do it, I think, is to get the app, the WABC app. It's the equivalent of getting WABCradio.com, except you have it in an app, you plug it in. You can listen to me, you can listen to Greg Kelly, you can listen to Bo Snerdley, you can listen to Mark Levin, you can listen to John Catsimatidis, you can listen to a lot of people, you can listen to my great friend Sid, and you can listen a good deal of time to my son Andrew. I know you hear him on here, but he's on WABC also as a guest commentator because, may I say, the kid's brilliant. Now, let's pick da-da-da-da, ba-bum-ba-boom. See, we don't have like fancy music here. I'm thinking of introducing a little opera, by the way, into next year, but that's going to be a little side talk we're going to have at the end about a few extras we're going to do and things you can participate in. My first story of the year, which I count as my fifth, any one of them could be number one, honestly. This is the story I think had as much impact as any, but it wasn't concentrated on as much as it should be. And there are subterranean parts of this story lurking below the ground that we should just bring out and mention. Don't have the time to analyze them now, but you'll see this is going to be worth podcasts, live streams, radio broadcasts, I think some panel discussions and documentaries. We got to understand this. We've been negligent in not understanding it. And it's who controls the minor child, the state or the parent? Now, I say control, I don't mean control. I'm not my great-grandfather from Montecatini or from Avellino or from Naples or from any other part of the world. They probably tried to control their children, I guess. Although my parents were so great, I think it was a little more enlightened than that. But in any event, what I mean by that is who's the legal guardian for the child? The notion in our legal system, the notion in our cultural system, the firm idea in our Western civilization, shared, by the way, by many, many other different civilizations, but certainly, I mean, we want to take Western civilization back to the Greco-Roman period and then sort of emerge with a written history with the Greeks and the Romans and the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages and the Italian Renaissance, the European Reformation, the emergence of England as the primary power in Europe, English law, Roman law, the great United States of America, the birthplace of freedom really for the world. It's always been thought of that a child didn't make decisions for him or herself. The parent was the guardian. Locus parentis is the legal term. When I studied family law, not an expert on it by any means, but family law is a part of English American law for 1,000 years, and for good reason. Let's just say this very simply, because this is worth a real analysis, and maybe on the next podcast I'll have Dr. Maria put in a word or two on this because she is much more of an expert on this than I am. Children change their mind. You know that. All of you who have had children change their mind. When I was a child, depending on the day you asked me, from the time I was 5 until the time I was 20. Rudy, they always ask kids this, and the kids hate it. What do you want to be when you grow up? Rudy would say, I want to be a priest. Probably that's plurality. Next. Rudy, you still want to be a priest? Nah. I'm going to be a doctor. Rudy, what do you want to be? I want to be an FBI agent. And I got the first junior FBI badge on my block. And I did. Years later, I got the G-Man Award from the FBI as the lifetime award for contribution to the FBI. Can you imagine? For a kid who got the first FBI badge, I used to listen to FBI on radio. So the story number one, as I said, is state, parent, who makes the decisions from 0 to 18 about things like, can you be allowed to be married underage? Should you be allowed to, I don't know, if there were, go in the military underage, if that such a thing was allowed? Decisions about money, large amounts of money being put into trust funds and money being spent, and that sort of. We give that to the parent because the child has to mature. A child does not grow up, is not born mature. A child is born with no knowledge and acquires it very quickly, but over a long period of time. Because humans have to learn so much more, we mature much, much more slowly than other animals. But it takes a long time for that wisdom to develop. And even if they're 18, young people make their share of mistakes. So that's why we have the parent there to make the important decisions when push comes to shove. And particularly to make the decisions that they are now putting in jeopardy, which are the ones that cannot be undone, the ones that are irreparable, like chopping your breast off or your penis. But up until the age of 18, the chance that you're going to change your mind about that, like I changed my mind about being a priest when I was 19 or 20. But it was not irreparable. You can't get it back. And it has significant medical implications. It is not a simple, oh, I feel like doing it, let me do it, and there will be no side effects. I mean, to the extent that they hid the COVID side effects, which they did, which is a travesty that was allowed, and a great example on how the Democrats cannot be trusted with science because they politicize it. Whenever is a medicine revealed and you don't get an hour's worth of it can kill you if you take it. You got that with the big money-making, multi-trillion-dollar COVID vaccine. We know how much money those companies made on it. Oh, we don't know if Fauci's getting royalties for it because he won't disclose his royalties. He's made millions in royalties. So was there a money motive for that? Is there a money motive to this industry? Is there a money motive to this industry of people changing their sex back and forth? Awful lot more people seem to want to do it than ever before in the history of human beings. Could it be that we're suggesting it? Could it be that we're suggesting it to a suggestive group, young people? Where did anybody in this country ever get the idea that the state could pass a law allowing the state to decide to take away a 13-year-old's genitals without the permission of the parent? Or maybe at all. Where? From Hitler? I don't remember that in Plato or Aristotle or Thomas Aquinas or the Jewish rabbis in the Talmud, or don't remember it in any kind of medical research or psychological research. Big Elias Mayorkas saying that the border is secure. This is an administration that has taken on from its boss the problem he had since the time he was a child. He is a pathological, sick, evil liar who lied about his resume when he first ran for the presidency, who cheated in law school, who just recently told us that his uncle, he gave him the Purple Heart when he was vice president, except his uncle was dead when the Purple Heart would have been given, and there's no record of it. Well, they all lie like him, but this is about people's life and death now. I mean, this guy, Levine, has Dr. Rachel Levine. He wants to stop health misinformation. Except this is, again, the game they played with COVID, that's life and death game. He's giving you misinformation when he tells you there's no debate on the downsides of gender-altering surgery. If he says there's no debate, that sometimes, under all the right circumstances, it is necessary, that'd be closer to the truth. although you might even there find some scientists who debate it, who are worth listening to, even though you might not agree with them. But when scientists start in with there's no debate, there usually is. That's not the thinking of a scientist. That's why Fauci was never a scientist. That's the thinking of a dictator, of a fascist. And this is a ridiculous statement for him to make, only affected by his own personal problems, I'm sure, to say there's no debate over whether gender-affirming surgery has consequences or negative consequences. Here's the exact quote, so I don't get accused of misquoting the lying Levine. We are in this nation facing an onslaught of anti-LGBTQI plus actions. I don't know what those are, but okay, at the state levels across the United States. And they're dangerous to the public health. The positive value of gender-affirming care for youth and adults is not in scientific or medical dispute, Levine stated. Positive value of gender-affirming care for youth and liars is not in scientific or medical dispute. I'm not a scientist. You're not a scientist. I'm just a pretty darn well-educated, intelligent human being. He's a damn stinking liar. Should be fired. If this guy were my health secretary, he'd be gone. Biden agrees with him. So here's an article. This is an article. I'll credit it if I can. You have it. Comes from the postmillennial.com. Doesn't have an author here. But the author comes to the conclusion here that is not true. There are an increasing number of reports from people who have gone through trans treatment only to find that not only was it not beneficial, but that they are permanently damaged by it. Males who have been fully castrated, women who have undergone double mastectomies, and those who have taken cross-sex hormones have spoken out about the harms caused by this so-called treatment, as well as treatment with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones lead to sterility, stunted growth, permanent body changes, uterine and vaginal atrophy. This, you see it when they advertise a medicine for a headache that's over the counter. And then they're required to say, but also some people, it affects their stomach, and some people it does this, and some people it does that. And then every once in a while, and some people it kills. You say to yourself, who the heck's going to buy that medicine? Never heard that for COVID because it was fraudulent. Just like a fraudulent election, they carried out a fraudulent pandemic and they killed people with it. That's another story. Well, this is absurd. Why was there no reaction to this? This is why I'm making this one of the prime stories of the year. When Levine said that, this country should have gone crazy. Just like when they said you couldn't go to church on Easter at the beginning of the pandemic. Like hell, you can't go to church. They didn't give me my right of freedom of religion. God did. And if you don't believe in God, nature did, and the Constitution did. Biden didn't give it to me. Trump didn't give it to me. Fauci sure as hell didn't. He'd take it away from me. Same thing here. This is an outrageous statement. If you want to talk about the pros and cons in an intelligent, decent way, of course, I can see that there are some people that will need this. I'm not one of those that blocks it out completely. I think it should be very, very rare. Slightly open to the fact that maybe it shouldn't happen. Slightly open. Well, a lot of these people have underlying emotional issues to start with. This whole idea that there's a large amount of suicides here doesn't seem to matter whether they get the surgery or not. Could we be intelligent, please? Among my other disgust with the Democratic Party is at the highest level, they've become stupid, ignorant, anti-intellectual. They don't read. When they were going after hydroxychloroquine, I read 200 reports from Italy, from Germany, from China, from Japan. Had them translated. The Italian I could make out. They didn't read anything. So now what, if you're Boston Children's Hospital and you think it's a phase, wouldn't you do everything you can to hold off surgery until the child was really, really mature? But instead they have caved into it. And then reporters and others who raise concerns about it are being attacked for being prejudiced, biased, white racist. White racist. I don't know what it has to do with white racism. I have a feeling, at least, I haven't done a test here of white and black people. I've talked to white and black people about it who are equally disgusted by it. I don't see a larger proportion of white people more disgusted by chopping off breasts and penises than black people. I don't think this is a race issue, pal. This is an issue of two kinds. You, because you're conflicted and shouldn't be in that position. And two, it's the influence of communism. So are all these things, by the way, which will tie together at the end. This is where they wanted us. This is what they wanted us to do. How about the Biden administration? Want to see how far they've gone here? The Biden administration was going to force healthcare entities participating in Obamacare to provide gender transition procedures and abortions, and was going to force the federal health insurance plans to cover them. They're going to get you to pay for it. Luckily, three very, very good organizations took them to court, beat the living daylights out of them in the Fifth and the Eighth Circuit, slapped permanent injunctions on them. Tell me this isn't a fascist administration. He was going to dictate changing the sexual organs of your child without your permission through Obamacare. Right-wing groups had to go, religious groups also, had to go to court to block them in the Fifth and the Eighth Circuit. And they blocked them with a permanent injunction. And then somebody there pulled it back. There's legislation called Help Not Harm legislation. It's passed in part in Arkansas and Arizona. It's been introduced in other states. And it protects vulnerable children from harmful gender transition procedures. Doctors cannot be forced to provide gender transition procedures. And you have to make the case and discuss and consider the harm to minors. You've got to get the permission of the parents. Same thing is true with education, except look what happened with education when the parents back last year started objecting to critical race theory, which says that this country is systemically racist, like our president says. Now, that's not a fact that this country is systemically racist. There's no proof that we're systemically racist. Biden, who is too ignorant to really make any sense of, but we still have to go with his words, systemically racist means that most of us are racist. I don't think that any of you observing America think that most of America is racist. You may think that some Americans are racist. I do. You may think too many are racist. One or two, as far as I'm concerned, are too many. But you may think it's even beyond that. But I don't think you think that most of us are racist. How do we elect as a Democrat nominee for president? How do we elect Barack Obama twice, if that's the case? We have an African-American vice president, Supreme Court. I mean, there's no institution in this country who has a bigger connection to slavery than the Democrat Party. If anybody's going to pay reparations, they should. I certainly shouldn't. I wasn't here when it happened. My family wasn't here when it happened. And I don't belong to that party. But I don't know, you want to belong to the party of slavery, it would seem to me you should be the one charged with reparations. Not the Republicans whose sons and daughters died trying to fight to free the slaves. But that's just a minor point, probably to be an irritant. But the fact is that when the parents found out that their children weren't being taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, when the parents found out that their children were being locked in school because of the Communist Teachers Union and the National Education Association, backdooring the Biden White House, the parents went to school board meetings and started protesting because they knew you were going to do permanent damage to the children because the teachers didn't want to work and wanted to acquire more and more power, more and more power. The Randy Weingarten believes that she knows better for the millions and millions of children in public school than the parents who love them. I know her. She does. But then that led to a seminal moment. This, I think, changed things forever and put this on the map and made it, even as it carries over now to this year, one of the biggest stories of the year and one of the biggest issues of the next 5 or 6 years and biggest civil rights issue. It was McAuliffe, the guy who used to sell the Lincoln bedroom, another one of the Clinton con men, part of the most corrupt administration in American history, except maybe for the Biden administration. And he made a mistake. Here's the mistake. Let's take a break and let's listen to the mistake. That you didn't have to do anything with that. You just awaken the sleeping giant, the mothers, the fathers. The school decides the final decisions without the parents. And then that was followed up by our crooked Attorney General making his speech, not using the word terrorism, but following up on the National Education Association's lobbying of the White House, in which terrorism was discussed, the use of racketeering statute was discussed, the use of the Patriot Act was discussed against parents. And it was all done within 2 days or 3 days of their lobbying the White House. And then Garland, who is a thoroughly dishonest man, lied about the fact that he was prompted to do it and then had to admit that he was. And of course, has also left out the fact that his son-in-law makes a fortune over selling this crap. Yeah. His son runs a company called Panorama. Panorama is in the multi-million-dollar business of teaching children about how they shouldn't be sure of their gender, that America is a racist country, that we're all oppressed, that blacks begin with with an inferior situation that has to be remedied, that whites are evil. And not only that, he makes all of his money basically from government. So why wouldn't his crooked father-in-law, who's been the most political attorney general in history for the most crooked president, covering up clear hundreds of crimes committed by that president? It's all on the hard drive. He just covers them up like a guy working for Al Capone. Imagine they wanted to make this slime bag a judge, a Supreme Court justice. In my view, this is a piece of slime. If you look at that hard drive and you see the crimes committed and you're the attorney general and you stay in that position, you're just as evil as the guy who did it. There's child pornography on there. There's millions of dollars in laundering transactions that you can just read. There's multiple millions going to the president of the United States from our biggest enemy, China. You lost any sense of patriotism, slime bag. This is really pretty amazing. Pretty amazing that his son-in-law runs a company, benefits from him cracking down on parents and making them terrorists. Did you think we'd ever have an administration this crooked? I'll make sure I get this right about the slime bag. Garland, Merrick Garland, excuse for a judge. Panorama Education, founded by Garland's son-in-law, Zan Tanner, produces teaching materials focused on systemic racism, oppression, white supremacy, and intersectionality. Maybe this is why his Justice Department thinks that white violence is the biggest threat to us. You know, we had a lot of murders in 21 while he was AG. We had 17 cities that had records for murder. Every single one of them had a Democrat mayor. Every single one. I couldn't find a white supremacist murder among the thousands. But it's the biggest threat that we have. Now, if we think that, we're going to spend a lot of money, and Zan Tanner's going to put a lot of millions in his pocket, isn't he? And his father-in-law is doing everything he can to make white supremacy, white violence, what it isn't, the worst problem in our country. Completely distorting everything else, and therefore not paying attention to what are the real problems in this country. Chinese infiltration. They pulled off, actually, several of the squads that were doing that. Massive murder, particularly of the black population. But of course, they don't care about that because they intend to replace that with the illegal immigrants. I mean, you would think they would start getting worried now because they depend on the vote because they don't really care about black people. But now they're going to replace it with all the illegals that come in. In New York, they actually voted to allow non-citizens to vote. Think of that as, with an open border, just ending the nation. Anybody can come here and express whatever they want to about America, so we'd have no values of any kind. So let me just read this to you so I don't get it wrong here. He produces, Panorama Education produces teaching materials focused on systemic racism, oppression, white supremacy, and intersectionality, all under the rubric of social emotional learning. The multi-million-dollar company's marketing plan appears to get educators to buy in and then show them how to pay for it, all with government money, sucker. These guys know how to reach into your pocket for anything, don't they? This guy must really get along with Hunter Biden. And then they give you a toolkit. Reach out to your local, regional, and state national policymakers and grab a lot of that sucker money. And they teach K-12 children that they're either victims or oppressors. The blacks are victims and the whites are the oppressors. Any effort to chill them from this is considered racism, could even be considered criminal. And Panorama's curriculum is as profitable as it is controversial. Here's the article if you want it. Jerry Dunleavy, this is way back on October 8, 2021. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. You know, here we are talking about the values that are important to us that are being put in jeopardy by this administration. And there is a company, there's a group of people that have been fighting for us, you know, day in and day out, Patriot Mobile. And I don't know, I think it makes sense that we do business with the people who are going to help protect us in this time of stress, really, on who we are, and what we're going to be. Patriot Mobile is the only Christian conservative mobile phone company or provider. And they've been on the front lines fighting for years for the rights of the unborn, for your right to defend yourself, for your right to due process. Again, they're the only conservative Christian mobile phone company. And they are as good as all the rest. And now that we have inflation, I think they're more reasonable than all the rest. They'll work with you to come up with a program that fits your budget. You get the same great service. You get to help the causes that you like. You're going to get a good deal. You're going to get a good deal. Go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy or call 972-PATRIOT. Use the code Rudy and you'll get a free activation. If you're a veteran or a first responder, you got some bonuses coming your way to make it even less expensive for you because you deserve it. So come join our movement. Go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy. That's patriotmobile.com/Rudy. Call 972-PATRIOT. Do it now. Give it a chance. Put your money where your mouth is. Welcome back. Well, I think we've covered the war against parents. I provocatively named it who controls minor children, the state or the parents? I would say under the state, we could put Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, Red China. Under the parents, we could put Western democracies. Which are we? Just how far along has that express train to Marxism gone? When the government puts out that the greatest domestic threat is white supremacy and white supremacy violence, when that is patently false. And not only that, if you go around protecting yourself against white supremacists, but not the other people who kill you, you're going to get killed. They also believe that any challenge to that, or any challenge to what school board wants to do, is a domestic threat. It's a criminal domestic threat because you're spreading misinformation. But isn't that just an inversion of, aren't they the ones spreading the misinformation? Like when Levine says that gender changing surgery isn't debatable, it's perfectly okay. He's not spreading misinformation. Weren't they spreading misinformation when Biden was saying that this was a pandemic of the unvaccinated? When the vaccinated were giving out COVID as much as the unvaccinated? He just didn't know it. Never corrected it. You've got to be very careful with this misinformation, disinformation thing. It's their Orwellian communist tactic for brainwashing you. It usually means that they're lying to you. And their whole national strategy for countering domestic terrorism is disgusting. I mean, they're going after people who do things wrong, but very, very small percentage. And they're missing everybody who's doing the massive crimes all over their cities mostly. I mean, Chicago on a weekend is like a war zone. Been Democratic for 50 years, and they don't give a damn. The two instances they cited in their national strategy for countering domestic terrorism, two were arrested, disgruntled parents at a board meeting, and they struck a school official who was throwing them out, and another who threatened to do it for throwing them out. My goodness, I used to have meetings in schools half the time when I did my monthly meetings. If I got all involved in that, I never would have brought crime down 65%. But maybe that's why under the Biden administration, we have record increases in murder. I mean, I don't know if you realize how many Americans have died because of our incompetent president, which gets us now to the second, or let's say number 4, since we're going to have 5 key stories for this year. And I'm going to make it vernacular. The president's out of it. The president doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I mean, really, you got a problem with that? Let's not recite them all. I've done them too often. He just went on his most important foreign mission to take on Xi of China, who's just made himself the emperor for life, basically, of China, announced that he wants to displace our nation, has passed our United States Navy without even a peep from Yo-Yo. Got the benefit of an air base 400 miles from China, that could have hit his country in seconds, given up by Biden for no apparent reason, except other than maybe repaying the $31 million that they paid Biden. He's sitting there with a treasure trove of stuff that would without any doubt compromise anyone. I have maybe a third of it sitting 2 rooms from me. He's got the rest of it. And they got Biden up to you-know-what, as well as many members of the Biden family. It's not every member, but it's not just one member of the Biden family, Joe, who's a crook, or distorted or perverted, or and China has it all. Well, he goes there and I don't know, he's in one of his dementia fits, I guess, because he begins by saying, this is the second time he did this. He did it on the way there. First, he thought he was going to Colombia before he left. Let me get this right. Then when he gets there, he knows he's in Cambodia, but then he thinks that the prime minister is the president of Colombia, Prime Minister Hun Sen of Cambodia, who is chairing the 10-member regional bloc. He's not like just one of the prime, he's the key prime minister. And by the way, he's Asian, not Hispanic. Now let's look at his introducing President Harris. First of all, I know a lot of people say, well, we can't remove him because Harris doesn't know what she's doing. First of all, we've got a constitution that sets out a rule, and it says that if the cabinet members believe that he's not fit to carry out the duties of President of the United States, they've got to bring that forward and have him examined. They are all a bunch of traitors. They can't not see what you just saw and think that that man should have his finger near a button. They can't see what you just saw and not realize that there are people dead in Afghanistan who'd be alive today if we hadn't elected this half-wit to the presidency, or that Ukraine would not have happened and thousands of people would be alive in Ukraine, or that people died of COVID because of the false information that was being given out deliberately by the crooks that were around him, that he did nothing to contain. In fact, he encouraged it with his stupid statements like it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and then treated people who looked at it differently like they were criminals, or parents like they were terrorists. This happens in part because he's mentally demented. He was always dumb. I know that from knowing him for 35 years. I tell you this, swear on a Bible. He was one of the dumbest men I've ever dealt with. Now he's not dumb. He has an illness that is 100% obvious. How about in the past? I mean, the one that gets me is when he tells us that he saw Franklin Roosevelt reading the comments to the kids on television. There were no televisions when Franklin Roosevelt died. Well, we get another example of it just a couple of days ago. He said that his uncle got the Purple Heart. And his father came to him during the inauguration ceremonies for vice president and said, Joe, we never gave Uncle Frank, I think. I'm not sure. Uncle something or other. Never gave him the Purple Heart. Now, if he got the Purple Heart, why he never got it, I don't know. He didn't want to take it. This is one of those, histrionic hero Biden things that come out of the, probably always had a little mental illness too. I went in the trees and gave out the medal to the guy who didn't want it, and it turned out he was never in the trees. He was never on the battlefield. He wasn't the one who actually gave out the medal. It was Obama. Or I beat up that corn pop. My money's on corn pop. I think corn pop probably knocked the living daylights out of him, but he makes himself the hero. He even did it, and I won't go into the details. He even did when he incriminated himself and admitted his bribe. It actually took place over 4 or 5 days. Not that dramatic sequence with Poroshenko that he has envisioned to make himself a tough guy. I'm a tough guy. I know tough guys like that. Usually have wet pants. Yeah, tough guy, right? If he were a tough guy, there'd be a lot of Americans alive today that wouldn't have died in Afghanistan. There'd be a lot of Ukrainians alive today that would have been slaughtered by Putin. What a disgrace he is. and he's got no mind left. So he thought he was, so he said, I went and I figured it out, and my uncle did get the Purple Heart. I went and got it, and I gave it to him after I was vice president. You know the answer by now, don't you? He was lying, right? But you think I'm just saying he was lying? He wasn't just lying. He was delusional. Both his uncle and his father were dead by the time he became vice president. Just like when he says his son died on the battlefield of Iraq. He gets corrected and then he says it again. That's beyond being a liar. A guy who exaggerates and makes things into very heroic things that aren't true. When you get caught, somebody like that stops because it's stupid to repeat it. When you're delusional and you say that your son died on the battlefield and you're reminded that he died in a hospital in Maryland, and then a week later you do the same thing, you've lost your mind. Now, what are we doing to our Constitution? What are we doing to our country by keeping a man in the White House who doesn't have a functioning brain? And why do we have no courage in raising that? Why? Where's Senator McConnell, who takes a half hour to finish a sentence? He could at least finish that one. Ever watched him? He don't have the brains to be president. The brain cells are going. That's why you twice say your son died in Iraq when you were told that he wasn't. That's why you think that you saw Franklin Roosevelt on television when you couldn't. And that's why you think you gave your uncle the Purple Heart and figured the whole thing out after you were vice president when he was dead by then. Maybe the first time you lied about it because you've been lying since you were born. But when you keep repeating it, you're delusional. Come on, doctors. We cannot go another 2 years with a president who can't remember what he saw on television, can't remember that he didn't give. And by the way, there's no record that his uncle ever deserved the Purple Heart, much less got it. But even if he did, he certainly didn't get it. He wasn't standing there in the White House after he was dead getting it from Joe. Although Joe may have a clear memory of that, which is why we should be throwing him out of the White House. Well, those are two of our stories that are not getting the attention they deserve. And that is the Biden fascist administration trying to take your children away from you for the purpose of education and for changing their gender. And the fact that we have, for the first time in our history, proven and absolutely in our face, we may have had it before, a demented president who does not know what he's doing, has gotten people killed as a result of his irresponsibility, and is going to get a lot more killed. And I don't care what you think of Harris. I'm certainly not advocating anything. She's the one legally in place. And that's what our Constitution says. And I'd rather go with our Constitution than a lot of people saying, oh, she isn't good enough to be president. Our Constitution says when the president is gonzo, it's the vice president. Well, she's the vice president. I'm not happy about that. But she can't be worse. Well, how many more people are going to die? And even if, I just don't think you have the choice. We have a system. We have to follow it. The Democrats have screwed up this system so badly. They defrauded you on the election. Don't get to the votes yet. They defrauded you through the cover-up, didn't they? They cheated you, American people. 20% of you say you'd vote different now if you knew what a crook he was. Or if they let him out of his basement and you knew that he thought he saw Franklin Roosevelt on television. There were no televisions when Franklin Roosevelt was alive. Or that he likes little children playing with the hair on his legs. Well, you got two of them now. We're going to be back in 2 days. We're going to give you the top. We'll give you the top 3 stories that were the most important, particularly the most important, that weren't given the emphasis they needed so we can be protected going into the next year. Thank you for listening. Please go to rudygiulianics.com and give me your feedback on this. I could use it. Tell me where I'm wrong, where you agree, what I should add. And we'll see you in a couple of days. Thank you. Merry Christmas, by the way. Happy Hanukkah. I'll have time to say Happy New Year in time with the next one. But I'll say it just in case. Happy New Year. In case you missed the next one, don't. You may see it after New Year. We're so lucky to be Americans. Just thank God. God bless America.